what's up? My name's Alea. Welcome back to my channel. This week we're going to be talking about romance novels because it's Valentine's Day. So why not? You know what I'm saying? So I have 8 different romance books to recommend to you today, and some of them are queer, some of them are monster romances, historical romance, all different kinds of stuff. So without any further ado, let's get into the list. So the first one I wanted to tell you about is Again the Magic by Lisa Kleypas. You guys know I never shut up about this book. This is a historical romance and it's number 0.5 in a series, so you don't have to read the other books in order to understand this one, and you don't have to continue on with the series if you don't want to, because the rest of the series follows completely different characters. And this one follows Aileen and McKenna, and at the beginning of the novel they are teenagers and they are both living on the Marston estate, and basically they're in love with each other. They're best friends that turned sweethearts when they were teenagers, and essentially they have this like secret romance on the side. Nobody really knows about them, and then one day somebody finds out about their relationship and things really hit the fan, and McKenna is basically sent away because of course Aileen's innocence cannot be compromised. And so Aileen knows that he will never stay away unless she says that she doesn't love him anymore, and so she basically says, hey, like, I faked it, I never had feelings for you, I just wanted to mess around, and she completely breaks his heart and he leaves and she never sees him again for 12 years. And then after 12 years he comes back, and now he's an entrepreneur and he's gotten really rich and he's not a stable boy anymore, he's got money, and he's basically come back to get revenge on the woman who broke his heart. And so one thing leads to another and they end up staying in the same house again, and he is basically trying to like seduce her so that he can hurt her emotionally, and she's trying to stay away from him because she knows that she's still in love with him, like deep down, and she knows that he's really hurt, but she still has feelings for him, and they kind of have this like really touching second chance romance going on, and it's really sweet. And there's also this secondary romance in here too between Aileen's little sister Olivia and McKenna's friend Gideon, who's an American who comes back with him because they do business together. And I actually really like the side romance as well because Olivia and Gideon are really cute together, and Olivia also has kind of like a sad backstory as well, and it's just really cute. All the characters in here have like kind of tragic pasts, but they all find love, and it's really tender, and it's one of my favorites. So if you have not read Again the Magic, you should definitely do so. And the next book on this list is actually the sequel to this, which is book 1 in the Wallflower series by Lisa Kleypas, and it's called Secrets of a Summer Night, and that's the one I'm reading right now, and it is so good. I think I like it even better than Again the Magic. And so this one follows 2 characters who are also at the Marston estate later on, and we follow Annabelle and Simon Hunt. And Annabelle is a wallflower, and she has gone through 4 seasons, and she's 24 now, and she still hasn't found a husband. Nobody wants to marry her because she doesn't have a dowry because her dad passed away a long time ago, and her family is basically broke. And so all of the aristocratic dudes are like, oh well, we'll just wait until she has no other option and then we'll take her as a mistress and we won't have to actually marry her, which is really shitty because men are pigs, you know how it is. But anyway, so Simon Hunt is this man who's actually the butcher's son, and they kind of know each other in passing because Annabelle's family has gotten meat from the butcher for a long time and stuff. But when they were younger, a few years ago, they had this like one-off kiss that was like really magical. And then afterwards, Simon kind of just bounced. And so Annabelle was really hurt and she felt like he just used her. And so now she like hates his guts, and they have this like nemesis thing going on. And so Annabelle is going to all these balls and trying to find a husband and stuff. And while she's there, she realizes that there's 3 other girls who are also basically wallflowers, and they all kind of just sit on the edge of the room while everybody else dances because none of the guys want to talk to them. And so Annabelle strikes up a friendship with these other wallflower girls, and they end up having this really cool like girl gang friendship going on.
6.5 hours later.
So all the girls kind of strike up this friendship, and they decide that they are going to help each other find husbands, and they come up with this whole scheme where they're going to try to go to all these different balls and like dress up really fancy and stuff and kind of like have each other's backs, and they're going to try to like pick men for each other and stuff, and then you know, each one of them is going to try to go off with the guy and then have the other girls catch him, so the guy has to marry him and like stuff like that, to try and like trick these men into marriage so that they can finally get husbands. And so meanwhile, Simon Hunt is still like super into Annabelle after these last few years, and he is now like a rich entrepreneur, and he really wants to take her as his mistress. And she's like, no, I don't want to do that, like I want to be a wife. And he doesn't want to settle down, but he also doesn't want her to be with anybody else. And they have this really funny banter and like sexual tension going on. It's so fun, it's so funny, and they run into each other in the halls all the time, and he's always trying to like help her and stuff, and he's just like all up in her business, and she's like, Simon, get away from me, like I want nothing to do with you, you're a swine. Oh my god, it's so good. So if you have not read this one, you need to, because it's my new obsession. I'm obsessed. I need to read the next 2 books in this series. I have one of them out from the library, and I got one from Pango, and it hasn't come yet, so I'm gonna read those soon. I might read those later on in February, because they're like #1 on my TBR right now is this series. And the next book I wanted to recommend is The Queer Principles of Kit Webb. So this is a historical male-male romance, and we follow this man named Kit, and he used to be a highwayman, and he kind of got into like a bad crowd after his wife and his daughter died, and so he used to like hold up stagecoaches and stuff and steal stuff from people. And then he finally decided to, you know, get on the straight and narrow, and he opened his own coffee house. And so Kit is really lonely, and he's just serving coffee and kind of doing his own thing and laying low. And then one day this aristocratic guy comes into the coffee house, and he has a proposal for Kit because he knows that Kit used to be this criminal guy. And so the aristocratic guy is like, hey, I have this object that I want to try to steal from my very wealthy father. Will you help me steal it? And Kit is like, dude, no, like I'm not a thief anymore, like do it yourself. And the guy's like, well, I don't know how. And Kit's like, well, I'll teach you how to be a thief. And so they kind of strike up this little relationship where they're having like thief lessons or whatever. And one thing leads to another, and they end up like falling for each other and having this really cute male-male romance. And it's also kind of cozy because it's mostly set in the coffee house, and it's pretty low plot, but the characters are really well developed. And I thought all the political stuff that was going on in here was really interesting, and Kit has a really sad and interesting past with his previous marriage and all of that, and it was just really good. It was fun. It was a pretty light read, so I recommend that if you are looking for a queer romance. Especially a male-male historical romance is kind of hard to find, so this is one that's really good. Next up on my list is Passions of a Wicked Earl by Lorraine Heath. So this is the first Lorraine Heath I've ever read, and it's the first in a trilogy. And I will say that this is a darker romance, and there are some really sad things that happen at the end, like trigger warnings for miscarriage and, you know, drama, big drama, miscommunication, attempted murder at one point. Like some crazy stuff goes on in this book, but it is really fun and it is really good. So we're following this couple, and they're actually already married, and they are estranged from each other. They really have not been together at all during their marriage, because on their wedding night they had this big miscommunication, and the husband Marcus like freaked out on his wife Claire and basically sent her off to live alone with the serpents at his country estate because he didn't want anything to do with her, because he thought that she cheated on him with his little brother. She didn't, but whatever. And so it's a whole ass thing, and he's been avoiding her for years. And she keeps hearing all these rumors from all of her girlfriends saying that her husband is basically running around sleeping with everybody, and he is just like making a big mess and totally out of line. And they're all like, girl, you need to go rein in your husband. Like, he is a menace. And she's like, oh my god, fine, whatever. And so she goes to see him because she's trying to rein him in, and because she has a little sister who is coming out in society, and she wants to have somebody kind of like be a guide for them at these different like balls and things that they need to go to so that her sister can find a husband. And so she goes to her husband and she's like, look, I know that you hate my guts, but I need your help because my sister's coming out in society and whatever. And so she basically like forces him to let her live with him in his main house. And so they do that, and her sister comes along too, and her sister is really funny. She's really like super chatty, and it's interesting because he has this grudge against her and doesn't even really know her, because they were like, they grew up together, but she's the same age as his younger brother Stephen, and he was always the older brother who was kind of like off doing his own thing and like didn't really hang out with the other kids, so they don't really know each other at all. And so through the course of this book they get to know each other a little bit more, and he realizes that Claire is actually really sweet, and they have a lovely like second chance romance even though they're already married kind of thing. But there is a lot of like miscommunication in here and stuff that they have to work through, and also he has a mistress when his wife Claire moves back in, and this mistress lady is quite something, and so things go down with the mistress and it's a whole thing. It's very dramatic, but it was really fun and I had a really good time reading it, and the audiobook is also really good as well. Next up on my list is Under One Roof by Alea Hazelwood. So this is the first in her little novella series. So this follows two characters, Mara and Liam, and Mara just graduated from grad school and her mentor recently passed away and she left her house to Mara. And so Mara's like, great, I'm broke, I'm fresh out of school, I'm gonna go move into this house. And then she goes to move in and she realizes that there's already a man living there, and in fact the mentor left half of the house to Mara and half of it to this other guy named Liam, and they don't know each other at all. And she goes to this house and Liam is like, what the hell are you talking about, this is my house, like no you can't live here. And she's like, no for real, like she left me half the house. And so he basically can't say no because she is half owner, and so he lets her move in, and they already have beef because he is very like cold and distant to her and kind of mean, and also she finds out that he is a lawyer for a big oil company and she is an environmental scientist, so that doesn't go over very well, and so she thinks he's just some big turd. And then they kind of have this forced proximity thing going on because they live in the same house, and pretty soon Mara realizes that this guy Liam is like actually kind of a hottie and is actually very sweet, and he doesn't really like the company he works for, and it's a whole thing. And they actually have some really fun banter as well, and there's also some really cute scenes in here where they're getting to know each other. Like at one point they're like hanging out on the couch eating Thai food and like watching some kind of like dating reality show, and it's really funny. They're both very witty and smart, and if you like, you know, academia kind of stuff, you'll probably like this. And I really enjoyed it when I read it. It was very fun. I really like these on audio. The audiobooks are really short and they're really fun, and this is just a really short, like 112 page long novella, so it doesn't take you very long to get through it. But this was a really good one and I recommend this if you haven't read it yet. And I know that the other ones just came out in like a big bind up, so I'll put the cover here in case you've seen this around. Under One Roof is the first one in this like bind up volume. Okay, next I wanted to talk about a couple books by Katie Robert. So I've recently been getting into some of Katie Robert's books, and I read The Dragon's Bride by her recently. And this is another romance novella, and it's a monster romance between a woman named Briar and a dragon man named Soul. So at the beginning of the novel, we see Briar Rose signing a deal with a demon, and basically she makes this deal because she's in a really abusive marriage and she's been married to this human guy for like 13 years, and he beats her up and he's awful, and recently she tried to run away from him and he caught her, and he basically said, hey, if you try to run again, I'm gonna kill you. And so she's like, oh shit, I'm totally out of options. And so this demon guy Azazel comes to her and is like, hey, you can sign a deal with me, and if you agree to come to the demon realm for 7 years, then I will kill your husband for you. And so she accepts the deal, and the demon kills her husband, and she goes with Azazel to the demon realm. And when she gets there, she is auctioned off to this dragon man named Soul, and she has to go marry him and live with him in his castle for 7 years. And part of the contract is that she has to give Soul the opportunity to seduce her, and that if they have a baby together, the baby has to stay in the demon realm after 7 years and she can go back to the human realm. And so she doesn't want to have kids, she really doesn't want to marry anybody else again after her awful husband, but she's like, I don't really have a choice, like I need to get out of this situation. And so she ends up going and living with Soul and getting to know him, and their relationship is actually really cute, but this is also a very saucy novella. So there's lots of like little zesty scenes going on with the whole dragon man thing, and of course he's like a 7-foot tall dragon man, so you know there had to be some fun scenes going on. But it's also kind of a Beauty and the Beast retelling, so like he has this big castle and he has a giant library and like this beautiful garden and all this stuff, and it's really cool. And so Briar goes and lives with him swim and has to like get used to being around the dragons, and she's kind of like falling in love with Soul, and they have to kind of work out like, do they want to stay together after 7 years? Like, do they want to have kids? All that kind of stuff, because Soul really needs an heir to his kingdom, and if the magic creatures in this realm breed with humans, then their babies are like super powerful, and the like integration of the human blood can like help save their people. And so anyways, it's a whole thing. But this is a really fun fantasy romance, and I really enjoyed it. So if you're looking for something really spicy to read this Valentine's Day, I would recommend this one. And then next up, I have another spicy one from Katie Robert, and that's Neon Gods. So this is the first in a different series, and these ones are full-length novels. And this is following Hades and Persephone, and at the beginning of the story, Persephone is living in the city of Olympus with her sisters and her mom just became like the Demeter figure, and so she just became like one of the main 13 gods, and her mom was awful. She was very like power hungry and kind of just uses her daughters for like personal gain and to like gain power. And so essentially her mom has kind of like agreed to let Zeus have her, and Zeus in this book is awful. He's like an older guy, and he has a history of taking wives to be like his Hera, and a lot of those women die mysteriously. And so Zeus is really powerful and kind of an ass, and he basically just like does whatever he wants to women. And so Persephone, unfortunately, is within his sights, and he wants to marry her. And she's like, oh my god, no. Like, this guy's awful. If I marry him, he's gonna kill me. And so she runs away from him, and she runs out of this party, and his men come after her. And so she's like running through the streets by herself, and she decides to run over the bridge that goes over the river Styx and run into the underworld, into Hades territory, to get away from these guys who are chasing her. And so she does that, and then one thing leads to another, and she runs into Hades, and he ends up taking her in because she is like injured after her crazy like sprint through the city. And then he kind of ends up falling for her, and he realizes that like maybe she's not as bad as he thought all the people in Olympus were. And so they have like a little saucy romance, and they kind of make this deal because Hades wants to get back at Zeus because Zeus killed his parents. And so they make this deal that they're gonna pretend to be a couple to make Zeus mad. And so they end up doing all of this like saucy stuff like in front of other people, so that word will get back to Zeus that Hades has stolen his woman, and there's nothing he can do about it. And so it's a whole ass thing, but it's very spicy. I think this is the spiciest one on this list. But if you want something fun and spicy and like, you know, Greek god related to read this Valentine's Day season, this is your book right here. I really like this one. I think that I like her monster romance is a little bit better, just because I really like novellas more, and I like the fantasy romance stuff a little bit more, but this one is also really good as well. And then the last book on this list is One Last Stop by Casey McCuistion. So this book, I would say, is my like #1 comfort read. I've read this a few times in the last couple years, and I really enjoy it. It is a sapphic romance, but my favorite part isn't actually the romance. I really like the found family element in here, and we're following this girl named August, and she's in her early 20s, and she has just moved to New York, and she's in college, and she's gone to a bunch of different schools, and she keeps transferring because she still hasn't found one that feels right for her. And it's basically about like coming into your own in your 20s and figuring out like who you are and what you want in life, and it's just really beautiful. And I really like August's relationship with her roommates that she meets, and they're all very unique characters, and there's lots of queer rep in here. There's also a drag queen who is August's neighbor, and I really like her as well, and it's just really fun. And then the romance comes in because August is working at this old like diner kind of place that serves breakfast, and in the morning she goes on the subway to get to work. And so on the subway she meets this girl named Jane, and Jane is this like really hot butch lady, and she and August just like hit it off, and August is like, oh my god, I'm super into this girl, but like I don't want to say anything because I don't want to jinx it. And August is like, oh, it's so funny, we always run into each other at the same time on the same subway no matter like what time I get on. Isn't that so weird? What a coinkydink. And then she realizes that Jane is always there, and Jane is like actually stuck on the subway. Like she is actually like from the 70s, and somehow something happened to her and she's now stuck on the subway and she can't get off. She's like tied to the subway rail line or whatever. And so they end up having this romance, and August tries to like save Jane and get her out of this situation that she's in. And also Jane doesn't really remember who she is, and so August is trying to like bring back her memories and figure out where Jane came from and how she got here and all that kind of stuff. And so August does a lot of really cute stuff for her. Like she'll bring her different foods and stuff to try and like stimulate her senses to see if she'll remember things from her past. So she brings her like a different kind of bagel every day and like different coffee every day to figure out like what she likes and all these different things. And it's really cool because Jane like slowly starts remembering things from her life, and she has a really interesting life because she's from the 70s and she grew up in an Asian American family, and it's about immigration and it's about, you know, being a lesbian in the 70s and sexuality and all this different stuff, and it's really, really interesting. And I just think that this is a really good book for, you know, trying to find comfort when you're in your 20s and don't know what the hell you're doing. This is a really good one, and it's very light and fluffy and easy to fly through, even though it's kind of chunky. But I really love this book, and I have a physical copy. Let me get it because I want to read you a quote from it. Okay, I got my book. So there's this really good quote from when August and Jane are talking to each other, and Jane is talking to August about how like it's okay to not know exactly who you are in your 20s and what you're doing with your life. And Jane says, none of us know exactly who we are, and guess what, it doesn't fucking matter. God knows I don't, but I'll find my way to it. Like, okay, I dated this girl who's an artist, right? And she'd do figure drawings where she'd draw the negative space around a person first and then fill in the person, and that's how I'm trying to look at it. Maybe I don't know what fills it in yet, but I can look at the space around where I sit, what creates that shape, and I can care about what it's made of, if it's good, if it hurts anyone, it makes people happy, if it makes me happy, and that can be enough for now. And August says, shit, you're good at this. And Jane goes, look, I was gay in the 70s. I can handle an emergency. And I just really love that. This book has so many good vibes in it, and I really like it. And I hope that you'll pick this up if you're looking for a book that's really comforting, especially if you are dealing with like an existential crisis or seasonal depression, or you hate Valentine's Day. You should read this one if you hate Valentine's Day, because it's fun and it's light and it's fluffy and it's not hard reading, but it will help cure your existential crisis, I think. So those are all the books that I had to talk to you about today. I hope that you got something from this list that you are excited to read this Valentine's Day season. And if you have any romance recommendations for me, please leave them down below, because I'm always looking for new romances to try out, because I have recently come into my romance era, apparently. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!